Welcome everybody. We're going to let everyone through the digital tunnels as they make their way here into our session today. I'm John, one of the panelist facilitators today, and I'll be the one being vulnerable, building out a agenda and session lab in real time. I've used Session Lab a lot. Douglas, who will be my sidekick, has used Session Lab a lot. We have Philip and Robert from the Session Lab team here. So I'm also double nervous because they've built the software that we use often. And as we've all seen, there's been an enormous increase in virtual work. And voltage control, prior to a global pandemic, did lots of rapid prototyping work. And so we really just leaned in hard into prototyping in a virtual context. We had a mix of in-person prototyping, collaborating with a few others in other remote areas, so kind of semi-distributed, whereas now it's been fully distributed. And we've learned a lot, and Session Lab has been helpful in our portfolio of tools that we use. And so we just wanted to literally have a session that we're starting from scratch, building out one of our prototyping modules inside of Session Lab. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started here in a bit. If you have curiosities, there are no dumb questions. You can just send that in the chat. And Robert, Philip, again, they built Session Lab, so they can answer any specific Session Lab questions. If there's any questions about the prototyping module that I'm gonna build out, which is called a design dash, if you have any questions about that, send that along to Tara and Douglas, and I will try to answer that. If you have any questions or ideas on the actual workshop itself. But I don't want to waste any time. We're just going to dive in. Again, no bad questions. You can criticize me as I build things out if you have a better idea, if you were to approach it differently inside of Session Lab. But I guess now that I'm saying the word Session Lab, I make sure as a facilitator to not assume everyone knows exactly what Session Lab is. Robert or Philip, do you want to give your latest 2020 pitch of what Session Lab is and what you hope it helps people with?
Yeah, so pleasure. I'm Robert. I'm one of the founders of Session Lab, and our mission is to help people design and run better workshops. The whole inspiration came as we have been designing workshops ourselves. It was just painful to use spreadsheets, as always keeping half an eye on, is my timing still correct, as I'm iterating and moving on my schedule and a bunch of other minor things. And we wanted to provide something that helps people to actually focus on the process and the interaction, and not with messing in tools that are not designed for agenda design. So I wanted to make that easier and also allow people to discover the right exercises, right activities to get better as a facilitator.
Awesome. And thank you, Robert. You've been really helpful at voltage control through all of our workshops, not only in actually running it and having a reference point, but in proper preparation of, co-creating with our clients, sharing it with teams. It's just helpful when we like to say it's good to have anti-fragile agendas, and sometimes you got to pivot and alter your workshop in real time. And what's awesome about your tool is quickly we can change a particular section of the agenda, and the rest of it follow suit. And so that is
amazing to hear.
Yeah, it's a real power up as a facilitator, because as we all know, you could have the perfectly planned agenda, but you're going to have to pivot on something at some point. Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Yeah, go ahead, Douglas.
Hey, John, can I just join in for a quick second?
Please.
Maybe while people are listening in, it would be really cool if you renamed yourself and put.
I think we lost Douglas. He froze up there for a second. But what I think he's getting at is inside of the participant button. If you click on the participant button inside of Zoom, you'll find yourself at the top of that list. And there's a more drop-down button, and then there's the feature of being able to rename yourself. And Douglas, maybe you're connected again now. Did you have an idea of what to rename? Like what to base the renaming on?
Yeah, just add your city to the end of your name, and so that we can all see where everyone's coming from. It's a
Sweet.
really fun way to connect.
Cool, thank you. I just added
So
Austin.
John, while they're doing that, we could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Cool. I'm seeing, wow, we've got people from all around the world, all around the US. This is awesome. It's cool to have different time zones. It's cool to know that maybe some people on this are drinking coffee and other people are drinking wine all at once. In-person workshops, I've never known that to be the case. So that's a benefit with virtual. Okay, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop, and I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here. So at Voltage Control, we have a number of workshops we do. And I just wanted to set some context on what we're going to be creating today. A lot of you may be familiar with the design sprint process, which is a week-long process of prototyping and syncing your team. Totally amazing process. We've done it with a lot of companies. We've done it ourselves inside of our company. It's a tried and true module for prototyping and learning a lot. Whereas my favorite day of the design sprint is Thursday, where you prototype. You're rapidly building, you're rapidly making. That's just where I personally am in my zone of genius. I'd rather just make something than talk about it. And so we wanted to create our own workshop that was an emphasized version of the Thursday on a design sprint. So we kind of got cute with the name and called it a design dash, because a dash is a little shorter than a sprint. And so it's a 3-day module, or it doesn't have to be 3 days, but it takes on 3 parts, and we prefer to do that in 3 days. And day 1 is you remix existing ideas to come up with a prototype. Then you spend a lot of time making, and then you listen and learn from people by putting that prototype in front of them. So it has some analogous components to a design sprint, but it's very much, let's dive deep into making very quickly and then get humbled by customer reactions or user reactions. So what we're going to be doing is building out a session lab agenda for running this with a distributed team. So I'm going to go ahead, and here we are inside of Session Lab. We literally have done nothing other than add an exclamation point here to introduction. So what we're going to do is we have to decide on our start time of when we want this to happen. All of our workshops that we've been doing, we found that we're Central Time here in Texas, most of us at Voltage Control. So we like to go from 11 a.m. is when we like to kick off things. And so that's when I'm going to set that time to. And one of the first things we need to do, because we're working in virtual, is to have a, you call it boot up time. I guess we could call it that, Douglas. So boot up time is just a window of time for people to chit chat, get settled, get started. And we'll just say, let's get settled here. When I'm making my first draft in Session Lab, maybe other people go about it another way. I like to just do a first pass on the rough backbone of the agenda and then revisit that, maybe run it by my partner in the workshop, like Douglas, for example, or maybe even co-create with the client. But I like to just get a first draft up and then refine. So I'm going to attempt to do that. So bear with me that I'm not necessarily focusing on all of the bells and whistles right now. I'll let Douglas help me with that, as well as we will do a second pass. Cool. So we're going to get boot up time so everyone gets settled. Then what's important is a tools recap. So ideally ahead of time with the distributive team of, let's say, 6 people that's going to do this design dash, we would have said, here's the prototyping tools we're going to use. Here's the virtual conferencing tools we're going to use. Any other tools, we would, of course, give them a heads up. But we've learned that it's smart to not assume that they read all that to perfection. So we usually have 15 to 20 minutes where we are just looking over the tools for the next few days. Ensure people have access and answer questions. So that's a really smart thing we've learned to do ahead of time. Cool. So after we've done that, it's time to get to work of the design dash. Well, why are we dashing? We have to remind ourselves, why are we going to prototype? What's our prototype going to prototype? So in order to do that, what we do as the first part is we define a problem. And that usually doesn't take very long, and we use a note and vote process. And what a note and vote process is, if you haven't heard of it, each person would generate their own stickies. We use Mural, for example, for that, or they could do it in person offline if that is your preference. But once people have done a bit of solo work, let's say 3 minutes or so, then we would have them place up those stickies and those notes, and then each person gets 1 vote, 2 votes, 3 votes, whatever you'd like to decide. And then they pick the problem we're prototyping for. So that's the purpose of this function right here, is to define the problem. And they are, it's basically asking the question, what are we prototyping for? So that is the next part that we would do. Now, after that, we're going to be doing the session called How to Remix Anything. This is based on a book that Douglas and I wrote. It's a method for analogous inspiration, and it takes the total of 90 minutes to achieve. Now, 90 minutes is a good chunk here, and so when we're going about building this backbone of an agenda, what Douglas and I have come to believe, one of the phrases we use internally is, breaks are a first-class citizen. And you have to be intentional about having your breaks earlier than later. People get fatigued, they're at home, they need breaks. And we need breaks also when we met in person. And so now that I'm sitting here as a facilitator, like, oh, we're about to have a 90-minute straight deep work session, it's probably best to put a break before that. And that's, that we're looking at only 35 minutes here, but I find that it's smarter to have the break before a deep work session than trying to fit in the 90 minutes plus 35 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this a break. We usually like to go with 15-minute breaks, and I'm going to go ahead and color this just so that it really sticks out for me as a facilitator. So cool, we're starting to have a bit of the early stages of our design dash here. Now, How to Remix Anything is much more than just the title. It actually involves upwards of 6 different team exercises. I won't bore you with building those out, but that's a choice you have to make. How granular do you want your agenda to be? That's a facilitator preference. I actually prefer it to be a bit more high level. And then in the description or additional information notes, I have a bullet point where I'm laying out the separate individual exercises that make up that whole 90-minute module. I know Douglas's agendas that he's designed in Session Lab are more granular. Douglas, you want to talk about when you're piecing it together, your preference and style of how granular do you go? Do you have any strategies there?
Just a second before that, John, can you
Yeah.
please make the screen a tiny bit bigger or smaller, actually, so that it's bigger for the participants? Yeah.
What about if I zoom in like that?
That's also fine, yeah.
Okay.
Much better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, Douglas.
John, if you could also refresh your screen.
Refresh my screen?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you could also refresh your screen. I've started to do that you're getting at. So I went ahead and dropped in an AM session block. And if you drag the items from the AM session in there, it's a really great reminder of how long each segment is, because you'll notice that the AM session will have its own duration, which is really, really handy, because then if you start adjusting times, it might remind you, you don't have to do any mental math to go, wait, how long is that how long did we go without having a break? So actually, John, I usually don't put the breaks inside the session. I'd pull those out, and breaks live outside outside the segments.
Okay, so I would have it before the how. I'd drag the how to remix out as well as the breakout.
Yeah, so then that way I can see that before my break, I'm actually 660 minutes. That's not right. What's going on there? Oh, could you start that session at 11 as well?
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, cool. And then now we can see that it's 35 minutes. So we actually have a little bit of time, but you were wanting to do that 90-minute activity. So you made that decision. But sometimes if we're already sitting at 90 and we realize like, oh, it's going to actually take us longer to do this other activity, then it bumps us over that 90. And so it's really nice to have this math there for us as a big reminder when we're scanning and double checking our agendas. And then to your point, John, I don't know. It's like I tend to vacillate it and between the different styles based on what's happening. But sometimes I'll have blocks that are 5 minutes, and it's a step within it. As a step that's part of another thing. Another trick I like to do is you'll notice that, for instance, inside the boot up time, I made a note to you. I was like, I could have made that a comment, but I wanted to make it more visible for the session. But like, what if we did appreciative interviews? So we could actually detail out like how we're going to do that boot up time, like a step by step, like with timing and stuff. As if we're pretty confident that 10 minutes is all we need. And then other times it's nice to have, if we think we're going to mess around with it and we want Session Lab to do the math, then it's nice to break it out into blocks. So I think it comes down to how much confidence I have over it, right? Like if I've done it a bunch and I know it's 30 minutes, but I still want to illustrate out each step so that I have the language and the timings to prompt the user, then all in one block's fine. But if I'm experimenting with it, I generally would break it out.
Oh, that's awesome. And so Douglas, just so that I understand this section you made here, that was a group, correct?
So when you hover over, sorry, I'm looking at your screen share, but if you hover over, so the little tool pops up where you can get the 3 options. There's like breakouts, there's blocks, and then there's the, I call them sessions. There's no tool tips. I'm not even sure. Maybe we'll have to defer to Robert and Philip about what that's called. But
yeah,
that one in the middle is what you use to create the buckets. Groups. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And so, go ahead.
Quick tip, John, if you actually add Douglas as a collaborator to the session, then when he adds a new block or group, they will appear instantly. Earlier you had to refresh because Douglas wasn't there as a collaborator. But if he's there, then his changes will be reflected immediately. So now you can co-edit the session real time.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's important. Sweet. So I think what you're pointing at is whether I do it here or I do it here, I'm creating a group. I assume if I do it here, it will consider that block that's already there and auto add it to a group. Is that correct?
No, it's just going to put it above or below that block.
Okay, got it.
And then you can move your blocks into that group.
Awesome. Love it. So I'm going to title this Deep Work because this AM session is really about getting set as a team and getting aligned and getting focused. Whereas once we do the little mini workshop for our book, How to Remix Anything, that kind of deserves its own section. And it is a lot of deep individual work with a few moments of people sharing their prototype concepts. To summarize the book, How to Remix Anything, it's all about, okay, we have a defined problem, and instead of just completely going from scratch on a new idea for a prototype, each person finds 2 analogous inspirations that are already out there, companies, products, services, and you imagine what would happen if I combine them together. For example, my 2 analogous inspirations may be Netflix and Craigslist. So those are the 2 that I'm like, both of them have features that are really interesting for the problem we have. And so then what I would consider is I mash those together in the context of the problem and that's my pitch for a prototype. And all the other members in the design dash would have their unique recipe of 2 existing things in the world, but remixing them together. That's the summary of what it is, in case you're curious. So after we've done that, 90 minutes went by, and as I can see here, the session would end around 1:20, so 13:20 at that time. Well, if you consider we had the AM session, we had a break, and then we just did 90 minutes of deep work. Again, treat breaks as a first-class citizen. It's time for some lunch for everyone. So we can call it lunch. And then what I like to do, just because we work with people in different time zones, I also just say that it's a break, because maybe it's dinner for someone else. And we like to usually just set an hour there. And so now that we've got some exciting prototypes, we are going to start distributing responsibility to move forward. And this is going to be ending the day. And so I'll go ahead and add another block here. And that session, we call it recruit, storyboard, and prototyping team. And this is a divide and conquer. And so this is a 15-minute session. It could be longer. I like to keep it short and sweet. Again, the team size is anywhere from 6 to 10 people. So at the end of the How to Remix Anything, we would have had, again, 6 to 10 different prototype pitches, and we would have voted on one to move forward with. So all these ideas are at the table. We do a dot voting or a heat mapping, and ultimately someone or the team decides that is a really cool idea. For example, John, the Netflix meets Craigslist idea, that's rad. Let's build a prototype of what that might look like. Cool. And we would have had lunch. So now when we come back, we have a 15-minute session where me and the other people in that Design Dash team would say, all right, 2 days from now, we have to start with the end in mind. We're going to put this prototype in front of people. We're going to interview them. We're going to get their reactions. So first of all, we have to recruit those people. So there needs to be two of us or so that are going to be focused on recruitment, because it's going to take some time to find people, even with online marketplaces, to find test talent. And so 2 people, maybe it's Tara and Douglas, are like, you know what? We're really jazzed about this idea. We're gonna be the recruitment team. I'm like, great. And then there's going to be 1 or 2 people that are going to volunteer to be the storyboarding team, which is coming up with the comic strip, if you will, of what the prototype test and the interaction is going to be. And then lastly, there's going to be 1 to 2 people that are going to be the builders, like the prototypers. We're all building in a way. It's just different tasks and jobs to be done. And so this session here is basically just divvying out responsibilities that are really important for the next day and the following day. And so this is basically decides who is going to be responsible for all of the separate jobs. Awesome. So then
John, just
we
a
will.
quick tip. Let me give a quick tip. I see that when you move those blocks into your first group, the start time is not that exact now. If you move to the top, just remove the time lock from the first block, because you can actually lock both groups and blocks. And if you lock both, then you see that creates a bit of a gap. So if you actually group different blocks together, it's much easier if you just lock the first group.
Yeah.
Currently you have the block locked. So if you remove the time lock there and just instead lock the first group for the starting time, then you'll get the nice minimap on the sidebar much nicer. Yeah. Now it shows the breakdown of your schedule.
And now block the group, just the group. Block, sorry, not block. Yeah.
Yep, so and just set the starting
to 11.
There.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm so glad we did this. That finally makes sense to me. So got it. And you can lock at the group level, and you can lock at the each
just when you drag things around, then
and now the timing in the upper left corner is also correct. So it tells you have 3 hours and 35 minutes planned so far.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I like to just actually have end there as a clear just section inside of the agenda. So that's day one. At a high level, this is day one of the design dash. We would have synced as a team. We would have remixed existing ideas, chosen a prototype, and now we've, as a small team, said, all right, in a distributed fashion, these people are going to recruit users. These people are going to build the high level story. These people are going to start preparing their prototyping tools, whether that's they're going to do a very design centric thing, a marketing centric thing, or maybe even a code centric thing. You're basically ending the day saying, sweet, we got a cool thing we're going to build, and here's the people that are responsible for those individual elements. Then we end, it's around 2:35, and we like, for those of you that are facilitators, I think this applies to people just running teams. What we found works really well is this, again, we're Central Time. Think about this in your own context. 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. is like the window of when we like are calling people to have full attention. The rest of it is like homework, deadlines, and individual solo work, just because I'm sure we've all felt it by now. Being on Zoom for 6+ hours is just not sustainable. And so we allow people to divide and conquer accordingly. And then the following day, synchronize somewhere within that window as well. So we've just found that to be a best practice. Douglas, you want to add anything to that?
No, I found that it allows us to have a lot of folks from a lot of different time zones, so it works quite well. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I noticed on the other day one that I just wanted to point out was how we use the description and the additional details. So that allows us to, we'll usually put in additional details to the right. We'll usually have facilitator instructions. So that's where we're going a little bit more deep into like think notes for ourselves or for one of our facilitators that are going to go run this. But it's probably a bit too granular or too detailed for the client. And we try to keep the instructions more about the why and what they're going to do, and less side commentary that the facilitator might need. And so when we create our agendas, we can create two different versions. One that we give to our client that's simple, and this has the why and the context. And then if we're giving the agenda to a facilitator, or we're printing out a version for ourselves, we have that the additional instructions, a lot more detail around like what we need to know, where we could run into trouble, what are some of the fine-grained prompting that we might need in the moment. And then John's about to move on to day two. And one thing I was going to say there is the sorting on these days is based on date. And even if this is an agenda that you're planning to run multiple times, we'll just put in a date, just a random date, so that we can make those little tabs sort properly in the order that we want them. So that's a fun little pro hack for you.
Great point, Douglas. And two more quick tips. You mentioned already that you can add to-dos there, but let's say if you want to record the specific materials, let's say a timer or a pack of flip charts for a certain block, if you click on the three dots icon in the right upper corner of the block, then you will get the sidebar open. And if you list the materials there for each of your blocks, then you'll get a nice summary of all the materials that you need to bring to the session. So if for each block you fill it in, now if you click on the info tab, the lowermost tab on the right side, then that will give you a summary of all the materials you need, and that also gets placed on the printouts.
Nice. Like in the export.
Yep. And lastly, there was a question or kind of a suggestion from the among the comments here. Yeah. So there was a question that how can you use contents or blocks from the library in Session Lab? And I just wanted to mention an example. Let's say if you realize during the session that you need an Energizer game, there's a really easy way to iterate on that. If you click on that search icon and just type Energizer, then you can easily search and pull activities from either from the public library of workshop activities in Session Lab, or if you have your own private library set up for your team, and also from those. So any activity can be simply dragged and dropped there. And again, timing is immediately updated.
Love it. Amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in the library. Go ahead, Douglas.
I want to yes and this like right toolbar. And in fact, we love to drag blocks to that rather than delete them because we might have brainstormed a lot of interesting steps and tips for the facilitator. And even though we don't want to, we decided to remove that from the agenda. We still don't, we don't want it to go away forever. So we'll just drag it over and we, because we might decide to bring it in later or want to come back and reference it. So rather than deleting blocks, we recommend just to pull them off to the side there.
Yep. So if you, John, if you switch the tab 1 upper, so the, not the search but the notes, that's kind of a parking lot. So you can drag any unused block from your main agenda to there, and it will stop counting toward oral time.
Love it. Cool. Oh, wow. See, I didn't know. I thought that was like just to type in notes. I didn't know I could drag that over as a sandbox.
At the beginning, when you were saying you just like to, you know, roughly sketch things, one way of doing that is actually typing these notes here, and then you can drag the notes and they can become blocks as well. So that's one way you could do that, typing one by one.
Oh, double enter creates a new one.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow, I'm leveling up here just by creating alongside y'all. This is awesome. I don't know many software teams where I get to just use it and they talk to me about all of the unique features. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, sweet. Cool. So again, maybe I have this in there or not. It's a good point. Like the design dash is energizing in my opinion, because we're just building and dividing and conquering. But I just want to finish by telling the full story. So on day 2, so I'm going to use what you just taught me. So again, I want to drop this into this group. I'm going to set this again to 11. Lock that. Sweet. And so what we do here in this day 2 is we would have already, again, established who's doing what. And so that doesn't mean we wait until 11 a.m. the next day to do our work. Those people that are responsible for recruiting, for storyboarding, for prototyping, they divide and conquer as they see fit. So day 2 is all about having meaningful moments of synchronization for people to basically just check in and say, hey, here's where we're at. The storyboarders can show the prototypers what they've been working on, or maybe they're starting to work together. The recruitment team is able to update. And so day 2 is really about rapid sessions of syncing on each team's individual responsibilities. So this is just this is the first check-in of the team. And then this is just basically answering how is it going, quick demos from each team. Then once we do that, we'll have our next session of syncing on where we have the storyboard team and the prototyping team will have a deep work session. And so we'll just call that the storyboard plus prototypers. And this is like your animators, or I guess that's not the best way to say it. It's like your editors in a way meeting with your animators for the first time in a movie analogy. And that won't be, so let me see how I would do this here. There's really deep work needed until this wouldn't happen. So I would take this out of this block here. So this is just sync number 1. And then this is just deep work in between. So let me create a block. And that's a long stretch of deep work of like 180 minutes. Let's see, where did I mess up here?
I think you locked that storyboard prototypes
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
when maybe you meant to set a duration on it.
Got it. Cool. So you gotta be careful with the lock and unlock. So then we would have, this is normally like anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And this is more, so there is, it's more than a demo. It's basically a co-creation session of, so this is hard. I don't have a template up, but we have a massive mural template that allows a storyboarding team, just like a comic has individual squares in it. The storyboarding team would have filled out, let's call it 80% of the storyboard. They're piecing together, hey, these are the moments the user is going to interact with our prototype. This is what it looks like. This is what we want to show them. And they're presenting that like 80% done, or maybe it's all the way done, but the point is it's usually not completely filled out. They're presenting that to the builders, to the prototypers, and the prototypers are there through their eyes of what's possible to prototype, and maybe some of the toolkit that they've been developing. It allows them to just finish up and take it across the finish line. Finalizing the prototype. Awesome. And once that happens, then there is one more check-in. Where the whole team syncs on the storyboard. And after that, it is just build, what we call build the facade. And that is for the next 180 minutes or so. You could adjust that building on depending on your team's capabilities. If you have more people, it might not take that much time, but that amount of time is a good solid chunk to build an awesome prototype that's a believable facade. And then what we have is a check-in and practice. So this is the day that's the most exhausting because it's all of the building and dividing and conquering. And what's important about having this check-in and practice, and again, you have to consider your team is 6:15 too late for some people. Maybe you shorten this and challenge the team to only be 120 minutes of building. But the check-in in practice is when the team runs through the prototype demo, and basically they do a fast forward run through of what they're going to do with the testers. One person emulates a test user. So it's important to end the second day not only having your believable facade, and again, if you've only got 120 minutes or 180 minutes to build a facade, you got to be really creative. You got to tap into your inner MacGyver, and you have to build a lot of things that match your storyboard, and you have to do it very creatively. But the point of having the check-in and practice at the end of the day is you're able to say, all right, we've got it buttoned up, we feel good, and we've already considered what we're going to do with the test users the next in the final day. So again, I'm speeding through this. There is a lot of details that go into this. I'm just showing the high level moments inside of the design dash.
One quick suggestion, John, if you go back to day 2, about the color coding, which you already used for breaks on day 1, but here, like I see you have check-ins 3 times. So typically, in this case, I would recommend to use one of the categories to indicate that. So It's more visual breakdown on the sidebar. What is the type of interaction?
That's
so
great.
Like throughout the day, there are those check-in points, and then you see in the left side, it's proportionally showing to the day when are those instances.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So I'd probably maybe create a new color for deep work. And deep work is me as the facilitator. I know that right now at this time, over the next 2 or 3 hours, everyone's doing their own work in their own way. There's no need for us to necessarily be, of course, we could jump back on a Zoom call if we needed, but I found that usually letting people go and do their own deep work in some way. And what's cool is we use Figma a lot for our digital prototyping. If I am curious what the prototypers or the storyboarders are up to, and maybe I'm on the recruitment team, I can have that open in my browser and see the progress that they're making. But the check-ins are just there to ask questions, maybe get feedback from others that weren't necessarily building. I found that the team that's focused on recruitment of the test users can come in during those check-ins and provide some objective point of views to help refine the prototype, make it more simple. Great. So day 3 is all about testing. And so I'm going to create a group where we sync again. Well, this is really test run, a second test run. So people would have slept. That's great. Everyone's rested. And here we are going to, it's a kind of a team sync again, but final practice run. And give ourselves 45 minutes to where we are going through and testing. So it's run through the prototype, make sure recording software is in place. So again, you're testing this prototype with people. You want to capture those interactions so that other stakeholders afterwards will be able to view the reactions to that prototype, so that as you move forward as a team, you have a shared story. So you make sure that all that is set in place as well, and also review list of testers and times. So this is just really the team, and I would get this started earlier than the other days, just because we have many tests to run that day. So an earlier start. Maybe you don't have everyone included. That'll have to just be your decision, but you definitely want the people running the test there practicing the prototype. Awesome. Then we're going to have a break because breaks are important. And then we have user testing round 1, and that is usually two 50-minute user tests. So I'm going to put some buffer time in there. We'll make that actually like 110 just for buffer. And then we would have lunch. I'm just going to breeze through these so that we can leave time for questions for us about the Design Dash in Session Lab. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I guess what I could do is, can I duplicate? Yes. No.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you show me how to do that?
If you go to the right corner, yeah, there in the drop down, you have.
Awesome.
Yeah. Perfect.
So since we're doing these, although this one we may make it 3 of them, depending on how you want to do it. This is the last time I've ran test. You have like a shorter chunk of user tests, and then finish the day with a bunch of those. Then we need another break because that is a lot of testing. And then we finish the day of, so we just would have watched in this example, we would have watched 5 50-minute user interactions of our prototype. We would have captured lots of insights. We would have learned a lot from their feedback of what's useful, what's not useful, what they wish was there, what they wish wasn't there. And so you need to have time to synthesize and discuss next steps. And that's usually like a good 45-minute session. And then we always like to make sure that the team, after that intimate experience together, we just built a lot. I, as the facilitator, probably didn't do everything perfect. So we like to do rose, thorn, bud feedback. That usually only takes 5 minutes for people to submit, and then we would end. And what's powerful about this is just after 3 days, you would have created a believable facade, a prototype, and captured, what would that be? upwards of almost 5 hours of content of human interactions that your product team, your leadership, and others could now move forward with greater confidence. Maybe you add to that prototype, maybe you throw it away and start new with a newfound confidence because you learned a lot from that prototype. But we just wanted to show that why we chose the design dash to rapidly go through here is a lot of Session Lab use in the past for us has been for in-person workshops. So it's all this stuff where we are gathering, we're there in person, we're in a fixed location, fixed time. Whereas we're now seeing more and more distributed work, and that still needs facilitators. And you can use Session Lab even if a lot of what you're going to do involves work that you're not actually on a video call with. Because the design dash has lots of moments where, sure, we sync back up on Zoom, we work through some things, but a lot of it is separate cohorts of a team doing deep work and just setting deadlines when we're going to sync back together. And I can make sense of it much easier by using Session Lab to even build out that distributed work. So if you have a distributed team and some a deep work project, prototyping, maybe a redesign of your brand, I challenge you to check out Session Lab to build out, it's like in a way, a better project execution plan. But thank you for bearing with me as I brutally came up with this in real time. But I think we should leave time for questions for both.
One quick hint, John, as you now built an agenda here, there's also a way to start with existing agendas. So if you go back to your home page, click on the home button.
Yeah.
And then you click on create a new session with the button in the upper right corner. You can actually choose among public templates, and there is also a voltage control template right up there. So that way you don't necessarily need to start from scratch, but if you have something pre-existing that you set up for yourself, you can simply load an already designed template and start tweaking that one.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really helpful. Yeah, there's a lot in the library to start from those templates, modify them to your own liking. That's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
There was also a question in there was also a question in the chats about breakouts, and you know, it's interesting. I don't use them much at all, but I think it's based on the types of events we do, because we do single track events even when we're doing our conference. But if you were to do a conference where you had parallel tracks, this would be really handy to design the fact that, hey, we're going to send everyone out into different spaces to talk about and do different things. And if their breakouts are going to discuss and do different activities, like you might have some group that's going to go in and do more strategic stuff, another group that's going to go do more tactical stuff. You can actually design different activities and assign different facilitators and make that really clear using the branching tool, which is really nifty. But we didn't show it here because typically if we're doing breakouts and everyone in the breakouts are doing the same stuff. But I think someone had expressed some interest in that, and so I just wanted to mention why we didn't use it in this agenda.
Thank you, Douglas. That's really super. I saw an awesome question, I think, from Marnie: increased participation when having a virtual workshop. We think about this a lot. There's this concept of, you could phrase it two ways: work together, comma, alone, or work alone, comma, together. The point is in all of our workshops, there is a lot of moments where there is solo work. So we are not fans of groupthink, where basically we think it's a terrible decision if the facilitator goes, all right, everyone, what do you think? Right? What that does is it invites only the extroverted personalities to really hijack the whole conversation. And so what we like to do is have many moments where each person, could be 5 minutes, 15 minutes, could be 30 minutes, where each person is doing solo work. We use Mural, we use Figma, to where each person is in their own view, doing their own work, and then we socialize that. But it's important to force someone into their own little placemat, their own little sandbox for a moment. Keeps them focused, keeps them engaged. They can feel like they're getting a chance to share their genius, because we all know each one of us is the greatest genius ever. And so you actually hold space for that. And then as a facilitator, have a moment where you demo all that, and then maybe have a participatory decision-making process. But I found that making sure each person has a deadline, a sandbox to do some kind of work is a great way to increase participation. Also, liberating structures, yes, totally fans of that. We've been building our own software called Control Room, where we're big fans of 2510, which is a really great way to democratize idea generation and harvest ideas. And so we built a little web app that allows us to do it virtually because we loved to do it so much in person. It looks like there's tons of energizers and other frameworks that already exist in Session Lab. So like Robert showed us earlier, there's a whole library, sessionlab.com/library. They even have /remote. But yes, participation is important. And again, what's nice in a world where everyone has their own tile, right, inside of Zoom or whatever video conference software you use, in a way, you're already in that direction of individual participation. But I would invest more in moments like that in your virtual workshops.
Yeah, and just to add, since liberating structures were mentioned, they are also in the library. So
yeah,
if you're planning something and want to use their methods, you can just plug them in very easily.
Thank you. Jesse had a question about in the design dash, the deep work session on day 2. Are the storyboarders and prototypers working together? What might the prototypers be doing at that point? Yes, great question. So it just depends on the team. I mean, ideally, what I would prefer is if I was running it, I'm also a facilitator a lot of times, and I get brought in as the head prototyper just because I love making things in Figma or Webflow or MakeSwift, or any other low code, no code creation tools. I would prefer my team be the prototypers and the storyboarders are working together, but in separate views. So if you've ever used Figma, it's like it's a vector illustration UI, a user interface design program, and you can have different boards inside of it. And so I'll have one board in there that is the storyboard. So it's like the high level macro view of the different moments of the prototype. And the select people are working on the macro, the narrative, the story of the test. And then the prototyping team is, of course, can reference that. We're in the same Figma file, but then we're building out the actual prototype in a separate artboard, let's say. And so that's that would be my preference. But if you were to divide and conquer, where the storyboarders are working in whatever tool they want, and the prototypers are not going to use that same tool, then I would recommend that they stay in frequent communication. Let them kind of self-manage. If they need the facilitator, great. But you know, essentially, it's just a team's working on the overall story, and the other team is actually building out the scenes of the story. And so whatever way they need to work together, ideally it'd be in the same program, but they have their own canvas. That's I guess my main point. They each have their own canvas, and they're easily cross-referencing it so that they're both updating it in real time. But great question. Does anyone see any other questions that I didn't pick up on? During the actual day of the workshop, does the tool send you reminders how much time is left in the activity? Session Lab,
not yet, but that's one of the next big things for the coming year.
Sweet.
To actually allow you not to just have the planning Session Lab during before the session, but during the workshop you would actually see where you are at. Are you behind? Are you ahead of the schedule? And just getting those from that again help you not to realize at 20 minutes before the end that you have 1 more hour of things to run.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we, inside of a virtual workshop, we're using Mural. Mural has a timer. And so that's going to be awesome to have the timer here on the agenda view, so that, you know, because as facilitators, we have to know how much time is left and sometimes course correct and adjust. I had a private message from somebody.
You know,
go ahead, Douglas.
I was just going to say that often when you're collaborating on a session with someone and you're running an agenda that that you built together, you know, time has a funny way of expanding and collapsing. So like you're, you know, in the morning you're thinking, oh wow, we're ahead, and then next thing you look at the schedule and you say, oh wait, we got to claim 15 more minutes back somehow because that debrief took way too long, or somehow I just evaporated. And typically what we're doing in Session Lab is we're tweaking the numbers to see how the rest of the day falls out. We're kind of compressing some things where we can, and just seeing like if we end this now, what does that put us at the end of the day? And I'll just say if you're doing that stuff and you have a co-facilitator, make sure they're aware you're doing it. Because they could look at this the agenda and go, oh, we're on time, everything's good, but not realizing you made changes. And so yesterday, Daniel and I were doing a workshop with about 50 people, and we had premeditated or pre-decided how we were going to communicate those things. And so we would color code things, or so that we knew that we had changed it. And so if we saw that signal, we're like, okay, I need to talk to Daniel about this because he's tweaking it. So just make sure that you talk about that ahead of time. Another thing that can be handy is to clone your agenda before you run it, because then you've got a safe copy that has your intended agenda, and then you can compare and contrast before and after and say, well, what did we think we were going to do, and then how did it actually turn out? And that can help us like start to design better agendas, because we know that like, hey, every time we do this debrief, it takes 30 minutes, not 20 minutes. Let's make sure we have 30 minutes whenever we plan for that in the future.
And these are exactly things we are actually planning to help you with even further, so you don't have to use workarounds like copying, so that we record that for you and give you some kind of report at the end.
That's awesome, Philip. One thing I'd like to ask of participants is to, you know, we wanted to give this a go because we love the Session Lab team. We use it so much and figured just like, hey, just like on Twitch, different software engineers open up the cameras on their coding process, and it allows other coders to level up. We thought facilitators and team leads could benefit from just seeing people jam. We have some other ideas on other sessions to do that aren't just me in real time coming up with something from scratch. One idea is like agenda critiques, or like an agenda review where we take someone's existing Session Lab and sit there as both specialists in facilitation and specialists in the Session Lab software. And we just like critique someone's built agenda. That's an idea we have. Another is work with a client who's like, here's what we want to achieve. We don't know how to design a workshop for it, and we try to do that in real time. Those are just two ideas we have. If there's anything you would love for us to do, a topic, you could write it out in a sentence. Please share that, because we want this to be something useful for you, your teams. But we definitely want to center it around making and growing all together as people who are agenda designers. So any ideas you have, share them in the chat, because we'll download the chat and take it into consideration, and you'll have access to all of this awesome information in the chat as well.
And I just wanted to also point out that we're going to be following up with a follow-up email that'll have all the chats. It'll have it'll have a link to the Session Lab. We'll probably turn that into a template. So just be on the lookout for this follow-up email. If you want us to reach out and connect, and you have other questions, feel free to drop in your LinkedIn profiles as a way for us to get a hold of you. Happy to do that. And we're going to also be following up in that follow-up email with a link that will allow you to get feedback on the session. So that's a way for you to tell us some ways that we can improve for next time, things that you would like us to do, like the ideas John suggested. And I'm just going to throw out a quick ending. I just got to say, like, we tend to go back to back on these things. So you probably have something else you're running off to. So if you could just take a moment and stretch and enjoy the moment, I think you'd appreciate it, and I'd feel really glad that you had that moment. So enjoy your day, and thanks for stretching with us.
And Philip and Robert, thank you for making such an awesome tool that's made the life of a facilitator much better. I know it's a lot of work.
Thank you so much for showing it. It's awesome to see in action. And thank you so much for guiding all of us through the design dash process.
Yeah.
We'll definitely use it.
Awesome. Well, Douglas, are you still stretching?
I am. Can't you see?
That's awesome. People are sharing some LinkedIn profiles. Really cool. Amazing. It's so awesome to be with so many people around the world. Someone asked, is there going to be a recording? We have been recording this, I believe, Tara. Is that correct?
Yep,
Yeah,
the
listen to
recording
that.
will be in the post-attendee email, which I will send out by tomorrow, along with the chat and a lot of the links that we've talked about here. So we'll make sure to include that. It's going to be a very lengthy email, but we shared a lot of information, so we want to make sure we are passing that along to you.
Awesome. Lovely. Well, Tara, would you prefer a stay for a minute, or just go ahead and shut it down, Douglas?
You know, I think we could hang on for a moment if people have questions that can stick around. I mean, that's one of the reasons we made this a meeting where people can turn on their mics and talk. And I honestly, that's one of my favorite things about these virtual conferences and workshops is that we have those moments where we can for people that don't want to stick around, we can chat for a little bit. So happy to connect with anyone that has questions or is just curious about anything.
Sweet.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that Ravid?
Hi, hello from Frankfurt, Germany.
Yes.
Do you have like a demo video of the control room or something that I can just get an idea what it's all about? Because I went to the website and I know that you are in the facilitation business, but I didn't really get an idea where it fits in the whole tool landscape that currently exists with Zoom and Mural and Miro and
so many tools.
Yeah, so many tools, so many options. I need to sort it out a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so
go ahead,
yeah, I was just, John, you can take over if you want, but we're going to be doing some little demos, like little 30-minute demos where people can log in and check it out. But we see it as kind of a nice, like in the session itself tool. There's a little bit of work you had to do ahead of time to kind of prep it, but a great way to share your slides out to a lot of people that are in breakout rooms. And we've built in some activities. So think of it as like a unidirectional tool where your participants can be filling out worksheets, collecting that stuff up, and we'll be collecting feedback on this session with control room. So you'll be able to experience the feedback tool directly after this, and then just stay tuned for some demo moments. We're going to be giving it away for free while we learn and understand what's most important. And we've been twisting Philip's arm to get us an API so that basically once you create your agenda, we could start sucking it in and then interacting with some tools. And we're also waiting around. Zoom and Mural are both working on APIs so that allows the activities to be a little more integrated. So you don't have to get so worn out switching between the tools, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great. I'll be producing a lot of those videos. I've been producing them from like a help center, like documentation for early test users. The way I'm starting to think about it is how it accents all these other tools like Mural, Session Lab, Zoom, is what I'm hoping it becomes is, I don't know, at your home, you may have like a closet or a drawer where you've got all of your games for when friends come over, board games, card games. I actually, as the head of product, look at building out facilitators feel like they have this game box so that when they're meeting with their team with all those other softwares, they can quickly deploy a team that allows each individual to have their own experience in the game. For example, 2510, if you're familiar with liberating structures, it's very game-like. Like I ask of a big prompt or a question, each person gets to submit one idea, and then there's this fun voting that happens with some music playing. It's very childlike, and I think that's awesome. And over time, we want our activity library to just be like a game center for team collaboration and ideation. But we have some assumptions that we know aren't accurate, and so getting it out to early test users is allowing us to test our assumptions and figure out what's useful. But that's kind of the North Star, is like your go-to game chest.
Awesome. Any other questions before we sign off for the day? Or maybe you're signing off for the day because it's your evening.
I have one question, may I ask?
Please.
Yeah, just what's your top 3 fun activities to do for online sessions? I'm about to start doing these things, and would be nice to hear what are the really good things that go down well for the groups.
So let me try to, I think if we can get a more specific question, we can get a even better answer. So what are you hoping to achieve with the activities?
Just engagement in terms of getting the people to engage, respond to the session. I would like to avoid a situation where it's just me talking for an hour. That's not going to be a very enjoyable experience. I'm out here in Cambodia, so hi from Cambodia, by the way, it's pretty late here. So yeah, I'm looking to try and find out some things that I could do that you guys have a bit more experience for working online. What kind of things? Maybe 3 things that could be good for the session. And
how well do these people know each other already?
They normally work with the same company.
Okay, so
colleague. Yeah.
Wow, you know, for one quick tip is we have on Thursdays. Unfortunately, today is a little different because we're doing our quarterly design sprint essentials, but every other Thursday we do facilitation practice. And that's a great way to pick up little tools and watch stuff happen virtually because it's like totally free and people are just coming and trying things out. It's thinking of it like karaoke for facilitation. And so that's a great way just generally to pick stuff up. Highly recommend it. And as far as specific 3 things, you know, one, Bill All like last week brought this really cool activity. I think he called it, I think it was 2 words, but I just remember heritage. And it was this really awesome 3 prompts where we're digging into people's backgrounds and letting them connect really deeply. And those were happening in groups of like 4, I think, and we went around circles and told our stories. And he had some really provocative prompts around like, where did your people come from? How did they sustain themselves? And it's really great. So anything you can do that kind of allows people to connect on that deeper level. What are the prompts that you think are good for your audience? It's like, and I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I'm gonna let 2 other people take stuff.
Bill can add to what you said, and then I can add a third once Bill shares something.
Thanks for that, Douglas. I was just about to chime in and say something similar. So I think the other piece is, how do we make our meetings more human, right? John was talking about really giving people a chance to center in themselves and make their individual contributions. That's one piece. What I try to do with every meeting is, after the introductions, give people a chance to connect somehow humanly, like something about their history or something about why they're there at that meeting, or just something that allows it to be more than just okay, we got to get to work, we've got to do these next 10 things, and we only have an hour, and we have to produce. One of the challenges of being in an online space is that the bandwidth for our humanity doesn't show up, right? Like when you're in a room, you get to see people, you kind of smell them, you know, you feel their presence in different ways than just visually or through audio. So we have to give people a chance to connect. And finally, I'd say that a lot of our meetings, we might talk about the purpose, but we don't necessarily give people a chance to make meaning of what's happening. And there's all sorts of different kinds of meetings. So it's not there's not one way to do that. But you know, checking in personally just for a minute, not like our deepest secrets, but something that allows us to show up as human beings online with each other, especially with teams that have worked together for a long time, but they don't really know each other. So the Heritage Circle, it's in this, I put a link to it in the control room Slack. These guys are really great about sharing tools, but if you go to toolsforchange.org, I'll have that up on my resources page at some point. I'll put that in the chat. But yeah, it's not about getting engagement. It's about making people want to play together, which is, I really appreciate what you were saying, John.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill. We used the Heritage framework in a virtual happy hour, and it was very, very beautiful and protected a lot of human dignity. So thank you for that. Alex, I'm just going to show something real quick, and you can remix this for an idea. And this, in a way, combines points that Douglas and Bill both shared. This is the output of, this is a mural board. I have this exercise called Group Improv Vision. And so it is a collective version of a vision board. And I have different prompts. This one is on creativity, or a more abundant future was the point. And so all I did was create this very simple mural that had the instructions of each person gets to choose 2 images that portrays their vision of a more abundant future. And so this is the outcome of what it looks like. I just wanted to share that with you. Why I find that to be powerful is everyone's got such a awesome mind's eye. And until you host an activity to let people do that, you can't appreciate it, right? It's really beautiful to see each person's creative side. And so that was a prompt that was focused on, hey, you get to choose 2 images that summarize your abundant future, what it looks like in your mind. I've had fun with more playful things, like each person drags in their image of the thing in their home that means the most to them. Like, what artifact in your home is the most sentimental? And you let each person drop that into a collage. And it's really beautiful, right? You get to see something visual. Each person gets to show off something. And I find that it keeps people engaged, and they get excited about answering that question. For example, what's the most sentimental artifact? Or in that case of the exercise I just showed, what is your vision of the future? And it was cool having 10 people do it together. You all of a sudden have a collage that warms your heart and gets you excited about the future. So that's one that I like to use with teams.
Wonderful. Actually, those are all good ideas. I like to use art in my training a lot, but again, online, it's kind of difficult. So maybe I might think of getting them to draw a picture and put that up to the screen or something like that. Make sure they've got a couple of crayons on hand. But these are all really good. I love that vision board idea. Really, really tangible to look at. You can almost feel what they're trying to think.
Yeah. Oh, well said. That's a beautiful way to describe the
Great.
purpose.
Okay. Well, look, here at Cambodia, it's 11:15 in the evening. So I'm pretty tired now. So I'm going to say thank you very much, everybody there. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and letting me know about this session. And yeah, I hope to see you again. Yeah, I'm going to give you, Douglas, and everybody a peace sign. Good night, guys.
Good night. A last question I have for Robert and Philip. What if you were to pick one module in the library of your vast library that you use inside of your own company, if you were to pick a favorite, I'm totally curious.
I will cheat here. I will not pick one that we use actively in our company, but it's actually something we used before in an organization where both Robbie and I worked. And it's called Finger Rules. And it's a facilitation method of basically how you facilitate any meeting, any discussion. And it has, you have several different fingers. So 1 means new topic, 2 means direct reply, 3 means off topic, and so on. So in the organization where we used it, everybody knew it, and it made meetings 10 times more efficient. Because you could really, we've used it in meetings with like 300 people, and then you could really feel the room when you suddenly get a lot of people raising three fingers and realizing, okay, we've went far. And
you developed your own meeting like sign language. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's not ours. I've found later resources. I've actually added it to Session Lab library, and I found resources, and it comes from various communities, but it somehow reached us, and we use it very much. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. I got these cards that someone sent to me. I think the finger rule is much easier because you don't need anything. But someone sent me these cards that like allow me to say like thumbs up, or so there's this concept of Elmo. I've been using this one. Enough. Let's move on.
Yeah.
But they're fun little visualizers. But I like just the use of one's fingers. That's really great.
Yeah.
Robert, do you have one?
It really depends on the topic. There are, I think, one I really like for team alignment is a framework called Team Canvas. That gives a couple of times to just really align on team roles and values and so on. But for especially for like planning and growth-oriented thinking, we're using the growth sprint lately in our most recent live company meeting, which was before March. Still, that was a really good framework based on the design sprint and more focusing on the Sean Elliott 3 area growth hacking framework.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I've been itching to ask you that. Cool. Well, everyone, thank you for sticking around, and we're excited to do more of these with Session Lab because as we know, an agenda is much more than a list with time slots and titles. You know, there's narratives, there's activities, and a whole mindset around designing agendas and co-collaborating. So we're excited to do more of these. And thank you again, Session Lab team, for all the beautiful work you've done to make such a beautiful tool that's continuing to blossom.
Thank you so much for highlighting and showing it today. It's great to observe it.
Yeah. Awesome. Everyone take care. Have a beautiful day, and try to go outside, get some fresh air.
Likewise. Good morning, good evening, everyone.
Good night, good morning.
Bye. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.